Welcome everybody and hello to everyone. Welcome to the online coaching. Today, under Contracts 2, we will be dealing with Contract of Indemnity. Contract of Indemnity is quite interesting topic. Let us know what is Contract of Indemnity under Indian Contract Act. Before that, we should know what is the meaning of indemnity. So let us know what is the meaning of indemnity first. What is the basic meaning of indemnity? It is to make good the loss or to compensate. That means if you are incurring a loss, some person undertakes that he will compensate for your loss. Make good the loss means whatever the loss is incurred by you, he is going to help you from recovering from those losses. That is the meaning of indemnity. Now if you understand the meaning of indemnity clear, you will be able to understand the contract of indemnity in a full manner so that you can answer any question regarding contract of indemnity. So we got to know what is the meaning of contract of indemnity. That is to make good the loss and to compensate. Do remember this very well. Now we'll come to Contracts Act. What under Contracts Act, section 124 of Indian Contract Act deals with contract of indemnity. What is it? Contract of indemnity. COI means I have written it as in a short form as contract of indemnity. So contract of indemnity means a person promises the other person from the losses which is caused by the promisor himself or by the conduct of other person. That is, one person, there are two people in this. First person, he is promising the other person. What? For the loss caused to him, he has suffered some losses. For that he promises that I will compensate you the losses which may be occurred by promisor himself or by the conduct of other party. So the person is promising the other to compensate him. Now let us take a beautiful example for this to understand it in a better way. We'll consider that Ram. We'll consider three persons here. Ram, Shyam and one more person is Ashok. Ram and Ashok are friends. And Ram is having some business dealing with Shyam. So they have some fight over it and they file a case against each other. Now Ram has to fight for the case and he urgently has to go out of station. So he asks his friend Ashok, Ashok, can you please help me in this case by just attending the proceedings and also by paying all the required legal expenditure. And he also assures that you pay the legal expenditure right now while I'm not in station, and later I will compensate you those whatever the amount you have spent. So now from this it is clear that Ram is the indemnifier. He is saying to Ashok, I will compensate you for the losses what you have lost. And Ashok is the indemnity holder. See, he doesn't have anything in this case. He is not even there in this picture. It is a fight between Ram and Shyam. What is the role Ashok has? Nothing. He is just Ram's friend. So Ram is requesting Ashok, please go and take care of the legal expenditure. So thereby Ashok takes care of all the legal expenditure and he pays from his pocket. Later it is compensated by whom? Yes, it is by Ram. So from this you can ascertain that there are two persons in this. One is the indemnifier and other one is the indemnity holder. Indemnity holder is also called as indemnified. See, for your better understanding, always think, we have it in our definition as promisor. If you get confused with indemnifier and indemnity holder, remember indemnifier has the promisor. Promisor, who is indemnifier or promisor? The person who is promising. Ram is promising Ashok. Then who is the indemnity holder or indemnified? The person who has already incurred loss due to someone else, he is being compensated. The person to whom the compensation is given is the indemnified. This is the meaning and the parties in the indemnity holder. This is as simple as that. Do remember the basic meaning of the indemnity. Then you can answer this question. That is, as under section 124, what is indemnity under Indian Contract Act? You can answer it very easily. And do remember the parties: promisor and promisee. Promisor is called as indemnifier and promisee is called as indemnity holder. Now after having the introduction, knowing the basic things of contract of indemnity, we'll move on to the next part of it. So we're coming to the modes. Oh, okay, now fine, you have entered into a contract of indemnity and there is some case. How do you get to know that this is a contract of indemnity? There are two methods by which you can ascertain that yes, this is a contract of indemnity. That is by, one is by express and implied. This you have studied in your contract law also. What is express? Express is, it is given in writing. It is expressly said that I undertake the responsibility to compensate this person. Let us go back to the example. Ram makes an agreement and give to Ashok. Ram undertakes that he will compensate Ashok for whatever the legal expenses he is paying against case filed against the Shah. So that is express. So express, how do you identify it as express? Let us take an example. It is by indemnity bonds. You have heard of indemnity bonds, right? So what are those indemnity bonds? Indemnity bonds are nothing but they give it in a writing that yes, I am compensating for the loss, whatever he is going to incur. Now let us take an example for this. Beautiful example. Ram, again we'll take Ram as a person. So Ram, what he does is, he buys a share from a company. It may be any company. Let's take any company. So he buys a share from a company and he needs some amount right now. So what he does, okay, see, I want to transfer the shares to that company itself. He goes to the company and he says, I want to transfer the shares. What does the company ask? Company asks for a document called share certificate. But here is a catch. Ram does not have the original share certificate. He has lost it. What is share certificate? Share certificate is a document which shows that the person has bought so many shares from this company and it is a proof that he is the owner of those shares. He has lost it. Now what to do? Now the company has to be in safer side. It can't incur losses and all. So it asks for an indemnity bond. Why does it ask for an indemnity bond? Because they have a doubt that okay, this person Ram might have already sold the shares to someone else and now he's again coming back and saying that he has lost it and he's asking for the money. So they will be incurring loss. Again, the person to whom Ram has sold may come to the company and say that I'll transfer the shares, please give me your money. So the company has to pay twice. Now the company has to be in the safer side, right? So what does the company do? Company says, you please provide me an indemnity bond, Ram. We'll transfer your shares. So Ram gives in writing saying that yes, in case if the company incurs any loss because of my shares, then I will be held responsible for that and I'll compensate for the losses. This is where your indemnity bond, that is the express mode, come into picture. Simple, this is clear. Understood? The next is the implied mode. What is implied mode? What do you think that it is implied mode means? Implied means by the very nature, by the law itself, it is stated that yes, there exists a contract of indemnity between these persons. So, what are the examples? Let us try to know by examples. Come on. We'll see implied contract of agency and partnership. How contract of agency, ma'am? How contract of partnership? We'll see that. How it is. Contract of agency. How many parties are there in contract of agency? Yes, there are two parties. That is the principal and the agent. What does the principal do? He assigns the work to his agent and asks him to get the work done. If the agent does something wrongful, who will be held responsible? Yes, it is the principal who will be held responsible. So who has to compensate for the losses caused by the agent to other person? Yes, again it is principal. So there also your contract of indemnity comes into picture. Understood? If the agent causes any loss to the other person, then the principal has to pay him. So the contract of indemnity also exists in this. It is implied. They did not write it in give it that see there is a contract of agency. He is an agent. He is a principal, and if any loss is caused, he has to pay. No, nothing. It is just implied. If there is an agency relationship, yes, then the principal is liable. We'll see the case laws later. Then second one is partnership. What is partnership? You have known where there are two or more persons, it forms a partnership. They form a firm, right? So for the acts of one partners, all the partners can be held liable, right? So in the same case, connected. For one person, if any partner causes any loss to other, even the others will be held liable. They have to compensate for the losses, right? So the partnership also comes under implied contract of indemnity. So is this clear? Now let's go to the case laws regarding this implied contracts only. The first case is Adamson versus Jarvis. What happened in this Adamson versus Jarvis? The case is very simple. What happens here is there is plaintiff and there is defendant. The plaintiff is an auctioneer. He is in good faith, and the defendant, coming to the defendant, he says that, see plaintiff, I do have some cattle now with me. Please sell them and give the money to me. This plaintiff is an auctioneer. Oh fine, now then I'll sell the cattle for you. What you do is I'll sell and I'll give the proceedings to you. Assuming that he is the real owner, he will agree. What happens later? After all the sale transaction is over, he gave the money, everything is over. Then what happens? Then suddenly the real owner comes into the picture. Defendant is not the real owner. Now somebody else is the real owner. He comes and he files a case against the plaintiff saying that how dare you sell my cattle to others? You cannot sell it. So he files a case and he recovers amount from him. Now what should the plaintiff do? Plaintiff has acted in a good faith, that assuming that yes, the cattle belongs to the defendant and I have sold that, and he has given the money to the defendant. Now plaintiff again he goes and files a case against defendant stating that this person told me to be a real owner, and he has made me to sell the cattle. He has impersonified himself as a real owner, and he has assumed it in good faith. Now what does the court gives the decision? What court gives says the plaintiff has acted in a good faith. One, right? So the next point is there is a relationship of principal and agent. That is, the defendant becomes the principal and that is plaintiff becomes the agent, and they have acted in good faith. Thereby the agent has acted in good faith. Thereby it is implied by the very nature of law that there exists a relationship between them, that is the contract of agency, and for the acts of the agent, who is responsible to pay? It is the principal. So principal becomes liable under the contract of indemnity to indemnify who? Yes, the plaintiff. So whatever the loss he has incurred, that is whatever the loss plaintiff has incurred, that is by paying to the original owner, now the defendant has to compensate to the plaintiff. This is a simple case regarding implied contract. Next you have Dutegill versus Loving. In this case also, what happened, it is regarding implied contracts only. What happened is, there are three parties here again. The subject matter is trucks. So what happened here is the plaintiff, see there is plaintiff, there is defendant, and there is a company called KP Culinary. So what happens here in this is, defendant, that is the defendant and the KP Culinary company, there's a company, they ask to the plaintiff that, plaintiff, see we want the trucks, please give the trucks to them. They claim for the trucks. It is actually theirs, and he claims that trucks. The plaintiff, he doesn't pay much attention to the KP Culinary company. What he does, he writes a letter to the defendant saying that, sir, please give me a letter of indemnity bond. I will deliver you the trucks. Now what does this defendant do is, he doesn't write any letter as such, but in turn he says, please deliver the trucks as soon as possible. By this very letter that asking him to deliver the trucks, the plaintiff delivers the trucks. And what happens finally? This KP Culinary company, they file against plaintiff stating that how did you sell how did you give the trucks to the defendants? You are not supposed to do. You have converted my goods, that is trucks, so you are liable to pay compensation to me. And finally they were succeeded and they got the money. The KP Culinary is out of picture now. Now plaintiff what he'll do is he files a case against the defendant saying that, see, I have incurred some loss, under the contract of indemnity you have to pay me the loss. Here, by the very nature of that letter, whatever is written, that yes, please please deliver the trucks as soon as possible, that itself means that there is an implied contract, that is implied contract of indemnity. Simple, got to understand this. Ugal versus Laverick, it is under all for cases for implied contract. The next part is, we move on to the next part. The next is rights of indemnity holder. It is dealt in section 125. This is a very simple thing. So you have three rights of indemnity holder. First one is damages, costs and sums. Very simple. What are damages? Which the court case, under court cases they are compelled to pay some damages for the wrongful acts. Those are damages that has to be paid. It is paid by indemnity holder, and it should be indemnified by, yes, indemnifier. Then comes costs. So what are costs? Suppose I'm filing a case against some other person, third party. So I'll appoint somebody as an agent, and he pays from his pocket. Now I should pay him because he has incurred a loss in paying the cost, the sums. It may be for the filing of the case, or it may be for defending the case. So the costs which are incurred for filing and defending the case come under cost. That has to be indemnified by indemnifier. The next is sums. What are the sums? Suppose in court cases or legal proceedings, if they enter into some settlements or they make some compromises, and the indemnity holder is bearing this amount, so who has to pay for the indemnity holder? Yes, it is again the indemnifier. So these are the three rights which the indemnity holder has. Remember as DCS, damages, costs and sums. Coming to the next part, we'll go to the next part. It is quite interesting part. It is whether insurance contracts, if contracts of indemnity. This is actually a very interesting topic which you can find in most of the cases. Insurance contract. What are insurance contract? Yes, it is again make good the loss. What are contract of indemnity? What did I say in the beginning? Yes, it is also make good the loss. So are both the same? What do you think so? It may resemble same, right? So now there are two viewpoints for this. We'll take from Indian viewpoint and England viewpoint. Under Indian viewpoint, let's come back to the definition again before understanding from Indian point. It means a person promises other from the losses that is caused by the promiser himself or by the conduct of other person. So what does it mean? It says that it is only by human agency. That's all, right? Does it say that because of any events like fire or accident? Does that anywhere mention that any events or accident? No. It is only by human agency and not by accidents or events. That is from Indian viewpoint, right? So in India, it is interpreted in a very narrow way. Now we have a case law under this. Let us see what is it. That is United India Insurance Company versus Mrs. Aman Singh Munshila. What happens in the case? It's very simple. There are some goods which has to be sent to the consignor. During its transit, that is when it is taken from from one place to another, it has to be stored in a godown. So what happens in a godown? It catches fire. Now it caught fire and it is destroyed. Now the question came before the court is whether it is liable under Contract of Indemnity or Insurance Act. The answer here, covering all these aspects, taking your definition into account, it comes under Insurance Act. So this is an important case to say whether it is Contract of Indemnity or Contract of Insurance Act. So this case forms important. So remember, from Indian viewpoint, it is only human agency. When you look at the definition, two parties, they are persons, human agency, not by event or fire accident. And it is given in a very narrow sense. Coming to the England aspect. What it says in England aspect, they say that fine, it covers both human agency as well as events or fire, even the accidents also. That means it may be due to flood, it may be due to accident, anything, it comes under contract of indemnity. So in England they say that both human agency plus events and accidents come under contract of indemnity. So in English law it is said that all contract of insurance except catch, life insurance comes under contract of indemnity. Why don't you take life insurance? Can you value a life of a person? See, when you take a life insurance, it is for you, it gets matured for a stipulated period of time. Okay, say for some 10 years you take, then it gets matured. Then otherwise, when do you get the amount? After the death of a person, right? So can you value it? So they don't consider life insurance under contract of indemnity. That is in England. Got it? Simple. And to get one more point, I just want to tell you one more point. Under India, there was a Law Commission of India in its report. That is 13th report 1958, Indian Contract Act 1872. They have made some recommendation. They said that expand this definition in order to include events and accidents also. So this is the report which they have provided. So now you are clear with the insurance contracts. Does it come under contract of indemnity? You have to be able to explain the Indian version as well as England version. Then next part, we'll go to the next part. Now we got to know the rights of the indemnity holder. When does the indemnifier become liable? Indemnifier has to pay for the losses. We got to know, see, if there is any loss, he has to compensate for the losses. When does he become liable? There are 2 points again. Is it before or after the losses? Okay, he's anticipating, yes, there will be a loss. You have to indemnify. Then should he indemnify then and there, or after the losses has occurred, he should indemnify? So this was actually a big issue, and there has been 2 different opinions regarding this. Different high courts in India itself have given different opinions regarding this. Let me take you to the landmark judgment, that is Gajanan Moreshwar versus Moreshwar Madan case. So that makes you clear that what exactly the decision given by the court. Now let us come to the facts of the case. What happened in this case? There is a plot. Okay, which belongs to Bombay municipality. That plot belongs to the plaintiff. He has taken it under lease from the Bombay municipality. Okay, Bombay municipality has given approved. It is there. It is very much there in the lease deed that it is his property. That is, he has entered into lease. Then what happens? This plaintiff transfers it to the defendant. The Bombay municipality approves it. Okay, fine, you can take it, not a problem. It has given approval but has not executed the lease deed. So in whose name does the lease deed stand? It stands in plaintiff's name. Clear now? Fine. Now this part is over. The next part, what the defendant does is he needs some money. So he thinks that, okay, fine, I'll mortgage this plot, whatever I have right now, and I'll obtain some money. So he mortgages that plot to a person, somebody A, let's take it as A, for 5,000, example. So he'll mortgage it and he gives that land as a security. And he requests, he'll come to the plaintiff, see plaintiff, I don't have it in my name, I cannot execute this mortgage deed, you please execute on behalf of me, I'll take care of all the expenses, you please bear it. Then he says, okay, fine, I'll pay everything. You're my friend, I'll do everything. Then he says, fine, everything, mortgage is entered. But there will be one personal covenant, that is one personal condition, that there will be condition under which plaintiff would become liable. The plaintiff, that is the first owner of the lease land, he would become liable if the defendant did not pay the interest. For mortgage deed, when there is a mortgage, they have to pay the interest, right? If the defendant does not pay the interest, plaintiff becomes liable. That is one condition. Personal covenant means one condition. Then some dispute arises between them, and finally plaintiff goes and he files a case. He has initially agreed for everything is signed, done. After some days there is some dispute between them. Then he goes and files a case in the court. He says that, please, I don't want to be, please release me from this mortgage debt, and also make him liable, that is make me an make him an indemnifier and me as an indemnity holder for any losses which I may occur, and please release me from this mortgage debt. So what now? Still he has not made a default, defendant has not made any default. So then what, the case goes to the court. Then he contends that, defendant contends that, sir, this is a premature case, still nothing default has happened, why is he filing in the court? And still he has not suffered any losses, then why he should he file a case in the court? Then the question arose whether the plaintiff is liable, the indemnifier is liable to be paid before the losses or after the losses. What was the judgment given? I'll just read out for you. It was said by Justice Chalga that if the indemnified has incurred any loss, a liability that liability is absolute, and then for that he is entitled to be compensated. That means he has incurred any losses, he will be compensated for that. Got it? It is very simple. Once the loss is incurred, then the compensation arises. So this is the gist of this Gajanan Moreshwar versus Moreshwar Madan case. This is a very important case under contract of indemnity, and also the United Indian Insurance Company versus Mrs. Aman Singh Munshilal is also an important case. These cases come for the implied contract, wherein you want to establish that these are implied contracts. Now to sum up, I'll just sum up this, and also I'll just give you a synopsis of this. The very first thing in your question, synopsis, you're going to write about the introduction. What is indemnity? Just give the meaning. Whatever is there in your dictionary, just keep that meaning. Say that to make good the loss or to compensate. Just give the details, how the person is compensated. Then come to the next part, definition. Section 124 is your contract of indemnity. Definition is given under Indian Contract Act. Give the definition. The second thing, give an example here. Then write the parties. How many parties are there? 2 parties, indemnifier and indemnity holder. Give an example here also. Just give an example. Say that who is an indemnifier and indemnity holder. Then comes modes. How are you going to determine that it is a contract of indemnity? Yes, express and implied. Just give an example for this. You can even include this case laws. Next comes rights of indemnity holder. Section 125. Tell them what are the rights. They can claim damages, costs and sums. From whom? Indemnifier. It is always rights of indemnity holder against indemnifier. Remember, it is always against indemnifier. The next part is insurance contracts. Are they contracts of indemnity? Give the 2 versions, that is England and in India. Then give the case law where it states that it comes under contract of insurance. Next, when does the indemnifier become liable? That is it before loss or after loss? Give this case which makes it clear that when he is liable. To conclude, contract of indemnity means where a person undertakes the responsibility that, yes, don't worry, I am there, I'll compensate for your losses. Now the next part in this unit 1 is contract of guarantee. Now let us take up this topic. This is quite interesting, very nice. We'll just know what is contract of guarantee. Contract of a guarantee comes from section 126 to 147 of your Indian Contract Act. Before going to contract of guarantee, let us know what is guarantee. Do you know what is guarantee? Yes, guarantee means assurance. A person is giving assurance that in case something happens, I'll be there for you. A friend is giving assurance, don't worry friend, I am there for you if anything happens, anything wrong happens. So basically guarantee means assurance. Know this meaning, then you can answer any questions pertaining to contract of guarantee. Now let's come back to this contract of guarantee. We got to know the meaning? Now, as per Indian Contract Act, what is guarantee? There is a definition for guarantee, right? That definition is defined under section 126 of Indian Contract Act. What it says, a contract of guarantee is a contract You know what is contract, right? We have studied. You know all the essentials have to be fulfilled as per section 10 to be called as contract. Yes, it is fulfilling. That's why it's called as contract. For what purpose? Now let us know why is this contract entered into. It is entered into to perform the promise made. There is some promise made. In order to fulfill that promise, this contract is entered to. Or to discharge the liability. There is some liability or obligation. In order to discharge that, this contract is entered. Now we got to know, okay, there is some promise made, there is some liability incurred. Okay, by whom is it incurred? For whose sake are they entering into this contract? Here comes the answer of third person in case of his default. That third person is there and he is making some default. He is not paying some amount. He has taken some loan, he is not paying some amount. So he is making some default. For that, at that moment, there is another person who is coming and helping him. So we'll try to understand this. First we will try to understand what is guarantee. Then we'll go to the examples with the parties, who will get to know who are the parties also. Now, before going to examples, let's try to know who are the parties. By making, by understanding who are the parties and understanding the definition, you will be able to understand the example in a better manner. So you understood what is a contract of guarantee. Contract of guarantee is a contract to perform the promise made or to discharge a liability of a third person in case of his default. Simple. The next part is parties. From this you got to know that there are at least, you must have got a vague idea that okay, there are 3 persons in this contract. Who are those 3 persons now? Yes, let us know that. The first one is technically called as principal debtor. See, the names may seem complicated. Principal debtor, who's debtor? So basically, no. What is the meaning of debt? Yes, debt means loan. So the person who is taking loan is called as principal debtor. He is taking loan or he is receiving something, some goods on loan. He is not paying. So he is called principal debtor. Remember him as a borrower. Simple. Remember him as a borrower. You all know who is a borrower. So remember him as a borrower. The next party, when there is a borrower, there must be a lender, right? Now, who is the lender? Lender is a person, creditor. He is creditor. So, principal debtor is a borrower, creditor is a lender. Got it? Now, okay, now who is this third person who comes into this picture? He is a surety. Now, who is surety, ma'am? Surety is a person who promises that he comes forward and he says, I promise to pay on behalf of my friend, that is, he is a principal debtor in case of his default in payment. He says that if there is any default my friend is making, I am there, I will pay for him. You need not worry, creditor. So, now the 3 parties are you clear with the 3 parties? Yes. Who are they? First one is principal debtor, creditor and surety. So remember, principal debtor is a borrower, creditor is a lender and surety is a person who steps forward and says that I will pay for him. So are you clear with the parties now? Yes. If you're clear with the definition and parties, we'll go on to the example. So we'll take an example. Ram, Lakshman and Bharat. Ram has got a nice car, red car with him and he is in need of some money. So he wants to sell it. Another person, Lakshman, he wants to buy that car. He likes that car so much that he wants to buy the car. But he doesn't have sufficient money. So he approaches Ram and he says, Ram, please sell me that car. I'll pay you in installments. Now Ram is in need of money also. How can I trust this man? Even I need money. What if he doesn't pay? He says, no Lakshman, I can't pay you. Please excuse me. Then upon continuous insisting of Lakshman, Ram says, okay fine Lakshman, you take the car, but on one condition. What is that condition? You please make someone as surety for this. Bring some surety, bring some person who will be able to pay when you make some default in payment. Then Lakshman agrees. Then he'll go approach his friend Bharat, who is a businessman, and says, Bharat, see, I want to buy that car. You please help me. You become a surety. So Bharat, his close friend, agrees for that, and both of them come to Ram and say, that see, Bharat has become a surety and Lakshman wants to buy the car. Ram, finally knowing that Bharat is a businessman and if Lakshman cannot pay, Bharat will pay for me. He says that, okay fine, take the car. He'll sell the car. Now from this example, can you say who's the principal debtor, creditor and surety? Yes. Ram is the creditor. Why is he creditor? He is giving his car on loan. Right? See, he has not got a full payment. Giving his car. He is selling his car. Okay, fine, you take to pay me in installments. What is Lakshman? Lakshman is the principal debtor, borrower. That is, Ram is giving him the car on installment on a loan basis and he is receiving the car for which he has to make due payments. Then, who is the surety now? Bharat. Lakshman's friend Bharat is the surety. In case if Lakshman makes any default in his payment, who will be responsible? Yes, it is Bharat, who has come voluntarily forward and is taking up the responsibility on his shoulders. Now, are you clear with the examples? Are you clear with the parties and the definition? We'll go further. What is next? We got to know everything about, we got to know basic things about contract of guarantee. The next part is types of contract. Oh, what is this types of contract? She is discussing about the contract itself. Again, there is a types of contract. Yes. You know something? Between each of these three parties, principal debtor, creditor and surety, there exists some sort of contract. Let us try to analyze it. We'll go with this diagram. Do you see PD means, please remember, PD is always principal debtor. I have just used the short form here. PD means principal debtor. There is principal debtor, there is creditor and there is surety. We'll take the same example again. Ram, Lakshman and Bharat is selling the car to Lakshman. So, these two are the main person. That is, principal debtor and creditors are the main person in this contract. Without principal debtor taking loan from the creditor, there cannot be contract at all. See, if he is not buying the car at all, then what sort of contract exists? Nothing. So, this is the main thing. Principal debtor means main. Principal is main, right? Head of the institution, principal. The same way, remember, this is the primary contract, the main contract. Principal debtor and creditor. Here, principal debtor undertakes to pay the money to the creditor, whatever he has taken on loan. Okay, if it is a principal contract, then what sort of contract exists between creditor and surety? Creditor and surety. Surety comes into picture later when the principal debtor is not able to pay the amount. So he comes afterwards, right? So it is a secondary contract. Whatever it is a secondary contract. Here, surety undertakes the responsibility to pay to the creditor in default of payment by principal debtor. If the principal debtor is failing in his payment, then the surety undertakes that responsibility. Got it? Simple. Then, okay, primary, secondary. Then again, there is principal debtor and surety. Now, what sort of contract exists between them? Is that a question? It is implied contract. What is implied contract? I told you in the last class when we were discussing contract of indemnity, there are always two types of contract, that is express and implied. Implied means by the very nature, by just looking at the relationship, you can say that yeah, this sort of contract exists between the two. So it is implied contract. By the very nature, it is there. It says that in case principal debtor he fails in his payment, then the surety undertakes responsibility to pay and wait. When surety is paying, surety is paying for creditor because he has made a default, principal debtor has made a default, it is the duty, it is the obligation on the principal debtor to return the money to surety. Surety is not there in the contract at all. He is coming and he is saying that he is taking up the responsibility for which he has no benefit at all. So, it forms the duty of principal debtor to return the money when surety is paying to the creditor. So, that is implied contract. Got it? Fine. We just discussed about the types of contracts also now. I think this part is clear. We'll go to the next part. The next part is essentials. We have studied initially in the contracts, right? Your contract one, that there are some essentials of contracts. Those essentials are required to be required. Why is it required? To be called as a valid contract. If those essentials are not there, then it is not called contract at all. There must be some legal object, there must be consideration, they look into the age, everything, there should be an object. So without that, there is no contract. Same thing also is required to be there in contract of guarantee. But there are few more additional things which need to be there to be called as contract of guarantee. Now let us see what are those essentials. Number one, existence of principal debt. Second, consideration. Third, consent of surety. It should be a free consent. Fourth, it should be written oral. These are the four important essentials that need to be there in order to be called as contract of guarantee. Now let's go one by one. Existence of principal debt. I told you while giving the example itself, if there is no debtor, principal debtor and creditor, do you think the contract exists? No, right? So, what is debt? I told you when I was explaining here, debt means a kind of, it's a loan, not a kind, it's a loan. So, if there is that principal debt, let us come back here, look at this diagram. If there is a debt between principal debtor and creditor, if something they have taken on loan, then only contract of guarantee comes into picture. The existence of principal debt is very much necessary, and without principal debt, it is not at all a contract of guarantee. Here, the principal debtor undertakes the liability that he will pay to the creditor, and in case of his failure, that is in case of his default, surety takes the responsibility. So are you clear with this? The explanation is quite very simple. Whenever you want to answer this, remember these points in mind. Existence of principal debt is very much necessary. Without principal debt, there cannot be contract of guarantee at all. When there is a principal debt, it forms an obligation or a liability for the principal debtor to pay to the creditor. In case of failure of by principal debtor, it becomes the responsibility of surety. That's all. Then we'll go to the next point, consideration. Here, the consideration is explained very beautifully. You have a separate definition for this under section 127 for contract of guarantee. What is it? Let's know now. What it says is, section 127 says that anything done or any promise done for the benefit of principal debtor it forms a sufficient consideration for surety for giving guarantee. What it says, anything done or any promise made for the benefit of principal debtor is sufficient for surety to give guarantee. So it says, let us break this definition and let us try to analyze. Anything you do or any promise you make, it should always benefit the whom? Principal debtor. When the principal debtor is benefited only, right, the surety will, the purpose of becoming surety is fulfilled. Yes, right. That is why whatever benefit, if principal debtor is benefited, then it is a sufficient consideration for the surety to become a guarantee. He says that if the principal debtor is benefited, I am happy for that and I become surety for that. Yeah, I should become surety for that particular transaction. That's it. So consideration, it is given in a very simple form. So from this we can get to know that three important points. What are those? There need not be a direct relationship between creditor and surety. Second, the benefit of principal debtor becomes an important point here. And the third is benefit of that particular benefit forms a consideration. That's all. Remember, there need not be a direct consideration between creditor and surety. Second, the benefit should be there for principal debtor, and that benefit forms a sufficient consideration for the surety to give guarantee. If you break the definition, you get to analyze all these things. Fine. Knowing this, we'll go to an example now. We'll take an example of A, B and C. Here, A, B and C. A is a principal debtor. Please remember, whenever I write PD, it is principal debtor. A, principal debtor, B, creditor and C is surety. A, what happens? A approaches B and says, B, please sell me these goods. There are some goods. I take an example of chocolates. You please sell me these chocolates on credit basis. I can't pay you immediately, but I'll pay you gradually in installments. Then B says, okay, this person is new to the market. He's opening his shop now. How will he able to repay? He says, A, you please bring some surety. Then A approaches C. C is a friend of A, and he has been he is in the market for many years. Then what happens? C says, okay, fine, I agree, I'll be your surety. Then everything is agreed. They both approach B and say that C will guarantee the payment of A. Then this transaction is completed. Now, to analyze from this definition, don't you think A is benefited? A is getting goods on credit, he is getting the chocolates on credit? Yes. So, for his benefit, surety has become a guarantee for this particular transaction. So, ultimate benefit is A, that is principal debtor. Got it? So, knowing this example, we will go to the next point. The next point is consent of surety. It should be a free consent. We have studied earlier in contracts 1 that there should be a free consent. Now, coming in this particular under contract of guarantee, there are two sections which deal with this consent. That is section 142 and section 143. What does 142 say? It speaks about misrepresentation. Misrepresentation of any material parts is not valid. That contract is not valid. 143 says concealment. Concealment of any material circumstances is again not valid. Got it? So misrepresentation and concealment. If you are misrepresenting something, not valid. If you are concealing some material circumstances, again it is not valid. Such contracts cannot be considered as a valid contract. Now let's go to an example again. What happens? Again we'll go back to this ABC examples. So A appoints B as a clerk. He says to B, see, I'll have some business, you go collect my money and come. You have to duly collect it and you have to report it to me. What does B do? He doesn't perform his duty properly. He doesn't get the money on time and he does some misappropriation, so he doesn't get the money properly. So A wants to remove him from the job. Upon A's continuous request, he says, okay, fine. Now you please, in case if you want to continue work, you ask somebody to become surety for you. In case if you again repeat this, I'll catch them responsible. They have to compensate me for that. Then B goes to see his friend and he says, see, you please become my surety. My boss is insisting. He doesn't disclose any fact. Then see his friend, he doesn't know about any of these things, whatever has happened in the office. He comes to A and he says, I will be the surety. B has not disclosed, even A does not disclose it. That whatever the earlier things that he has not accounted properly. What happens after a few days? Again B does the same thing. He does not account properly. Now surety. Now A catches C has a surety. See, you pay me now because B has not paid. Do you think it is a valid contract? No. Why? Because the facts are being concealed. A does not disclose that B's earlier behavior. He doesn't say that, see, he did not account things properly even earlier. So both were silent. B won't disclose anyways. A should have disclosed. It was the responsibility of A. Even A does not disclose. So what is it? Do you think it is a valid contract? No, it is not valid. Let us go to another example. In another example, A says there are three persons again, A, B and C. there is some transaction for iron ore worth 2000 tons. So okay, they enter into it, and they agree to pay 2000 tons for this period. Everything is done, and they make C as a surety. C says, okay fine, I'll be a surety for this particular transaction. What happens behind C, that is C doesn't know anything, he's a surety. This A and B, they enter into a mutual contract saying this, B says, I have not cleared your old debts, right? So you please include in this, I'll pay you 5 rupees extra per ton, whatever market price is there, plus 5 rupees I'll pay you. You please include in this transaction only. We'll make it up, and I'll do all. I'll realize, so that you can realize all the amount, and you can just take it from this amount itself, and you don't disclose it to surety C. So they'll have a separate contract, and see the surety is not aware of it. So now what happens? Do you think this contract is valid? Again, no. Why? Because they have not disclosed the facts. They are having a private contract which surety is not aware, and they are putting the liability on surety. If there is a default by debtor, principal debtor, surety has to bear the expenses. Surety should be at least aware of some facts. I agree that he should, if he doesn't know, entire thing is okay, but at least he should know how much amount he has to pay, and certain facts. What are the transactions between the parties, and how, to what extent is he liable? That at least he should be aware of it. But in this case, they were having a private transaction for which they had agreed for 5 rupees extra per ton, plus the amount, original amount which they agreed, that is 2000 per ton. So this contract also doesn't become valid. So they are concealing. So always remember that whenever you discuss about the consent of surety, it should always be the free consent. He should be knowing at least the amount, extent of liability which he has to incur, and the transaction, what sort of transaction they have entered into. The last part of it is written or oral. The contract should be written or oral. It is said in section 126. When you just refer 126 of Indian Contract Act, you come across this, it should be written or oral. In our Indian Contract Act, it can be written or either oral. But the English law says that it has to be written and it has to be signed by the parties. So they specifically mention it has to be written and signed by the parties. Most of them do follow a written type of agreements itself, because in order to be on a safer side. The last bit, minor's debt. What do you think that minor's debt would be? Can a minor enter into this contract of guarantee? Can a minor become a principal debtor, and can he bear the expenses? What in case of his default? In one of the case in English courts, Counts and Company versus Brown Lexi, it was said that no, it is not valid. You cannot consider minor debt as a debt. In India, what is the case? There are many case laws pertaining to that. You can find out that it becomes the responsibility of the principal surety. See, I'll explain you again. If minor has taken a debt and there is a surety for this, the minor is set aside, and whatever the debt, the surety becomes the principal debtor. He steps into the shoes of principal debtor. He himself, it is assumed that he himself has taken the loan. So that was decided in our cases. So minor debt is always not valid. That's all. Simple. Thank you. In the next class, we will be learning about rights of discharge of surety, then what are his rights, and we'll know the important thing, that is difference between contract of indemnity and contract of contract of guarantee, which is the most important, and most of the questions do come from that. Well, I'll just revise it. I'll give you a synopsis of this, of today's class. That is, first one is we got to know the meaning of guarantee, that is assurance. Then as per Indian Contract Act, what is the definition? We just discussed it. We discussed the number of parties, types of contract that exist between each of the parties. Then the essentials. Essentials are 4 important essentials. Other essentials of our contract are also necessary, but 4 important is existence of principal debt, consideration that is given in your section 127, anything done or any promise done for the benefit, remember the word benefit, benefit of whom principal debtor forms in consideration for surety to give his guarantee. With an example, please do explain with some examples. If you come across some cases, you can just give the cases also. Then the consent of surety should be free consent, and you have to please explain this section 142 and section 143, which speaks about misrepresentation of material facts and concealment of material circumstances. Please do explain this. Then it should be written or oral. Written, oral, section 126. Then you can talk about the minus debt, and you can give this case law, whatever it is stated, and you can give the Indian version also. Thank you. Of guarantee. In this class, we'll continue with the contract of guarantee. Under that, you have a very important topic, that is liability of the surety. This is a very important question in your exam, and most of the time you find this question. Especially the question goes like this: the liability of the surety is coextensive with that of principal debtor, otherwise provided by the contract. Please explain. This is the question which you usually get. So we'll try to know how to answer this by few points. Now let us proceed. So in the previous class we studied that for the liability of the principal debtor, and when he makes the default for that liability, who has to pay? It is the surety who has to pay for that. Now, surety has got certain liability there. That is confirmed, right? Surety has certain liability. What is that liability? How do you compare with that of principal debtor? Is it same, or surety has got more liability or lesser liability than that of principal debtor? We'll know that. The very important section is section 128. It states that liability of the surety with that of principal debtor, the liability of the surety is coextensive with that of the principal debtor. What does this definition mean? Coextensive means, it means whatever the liability that the principal debtor has got, if it is for 10,000, the same would be for the surety also. That's all. The word coextensive means both are at same. Or the surety and the principal debtor's liability obligation would be the same. But wait, there is one more point to be noted. Otherwise provided by the contract. If the contract says that, if they make a contract that, I'll give you an example and explain this. If the contract says, principal debtor has taken a loan for worth 10,000 rupees, and the surety states that, see, my friend, I will pay you. I'll pay for your default. In case if you make default, I'll pay 8,000. So is it in par? Actual amount is 10,000 and surety is agreeing for 8,000. So if it is provided in the contract that he will pay the default amount up to this particular extent, that is only for 8,000, that remains as liability. Got it? So always remember this definition, this particular section, that liability of the surety is always coextensive with that of principal debtor. This should be registered in your mind. Otherwise provided by the contract. Got it? If there is any other separate contract made by them, then it does not come into picture. I mean, whatever the default amount the surety has to pay varies. Got it? I gave you with an example. The liability of the surety is exactly same as that of liability of principal debtor. Now let us take some examples and we'll try to analyze it. Whenever there is a default by principal debtor, it is surety who has to pay for it. What are the things that surety has to pay? I mean, what is the amount that surety has to pay? Surety has to pay the principal amount. Principal amount is, let's take an example. The principal debtor has taken loan from the creditor worth 10,000 rupees. There is a surety for that. He makes a default. The creditor tries to recover it from principal debtor. He has to spend some amount for commuting, all those things, for sending some person. So he has incurred some other expenses also. Plus, whenever there is a loan, there is an interest, right? So now How much surety has to bear? He has to bear the principal amount, number 1, the interest amount on that loan, number 2, and number 3 is whatever the expenses are incurred, those expenses are to be borne by the surety. Got it? Now we are discussing about how the what is the liability of the surety. Remember this topic and try to analyze it. The next point is what happens? What happens if the liability of the principal debtor decreases? That decreases in the sense there must be, if something happens and if the creditor says he decreases the amount of principal debtor's loan. Suppose it is 10,000. He says, creditor says, okay, you are not able to pay, at least pay me 6,000 and clear this loan.